Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, where we talk all about how to live as happier, healthier adults. Yes, indeed. And today we have the fabulous Gretchen Rubin on the show teaching us how to do just that. She is I'm going to call her a happiness expert. She is incredible. We had a phenomenal show. She gives us so many great ideas. And yes, as always, there are some things about me that you will learn that I was even surprised about based on her Four Tendencies, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So happy summer, everybody. We are officially in summer. And it's a wonderful time because it's, we're kind of, a little bit more relaxed in the summer, a little bit more laid back. It's a wonderful time to do self-work. Of course, I believe we do this year round, but some of us like to do this in the summer. And if that's you, do not forget, we have some fabulous helpers in the adult chair community, our adult chair coaches. They are at theadultchair.com/coach. If you'd like to check out some of our amazing coaches and do some work. Yeah. Work through those triggers, work through any sort of issue, and of course, help you to achieve some of your goals. And we are halfway through, which is crazy to me, our adult chair coaching certification for 2022. So I'm going to have even more coaches for you come September. So get ready for that. But for today, let's get back to talking about happiness, right? Today, Gretchen and I spoke about some concrete steps to start boosting your happiness today. I love that, today. And I love easy steps. And Gretchen Rubin is all about that. She also shared with us the Four Tendencies personality framework. This was so cool. I literally ended the podcast and reached out to everyone on my team and even a lot of my master coaches. And I said, you all need to do this immediately so you can figure out how you're showing up in the world. It is so cool. I advise you all. It's free to check it out. And we talk about it on the show today. But yeah, I got sold out. My team had a good laugh and they figured out which tendency I was. And I share it right in the middle of the show, of course. Gretchen and I also talked about how to overcome resistance and work with your tendencies to be as successful and happy as possible. How about that? Also talked about misconceptions about happiness and techniques to build happiness now and create better habits that will create happiness. So what a show it was, a show full of great, great ideas that you can start applying today. So let me tell you a little bit more about Gretchen Rubin. She is one of today's most influential and thought-provoking observers of happiness and human nature. She's known for her ability to distill and convey complex ideas with humor and clarity in a way that's accessible to a wide audience. She's the author of many books, including the blockbuster New York Times bestsellers, The Four Tendencies, Better Than Before, and The Happiness Project. She has an enormous readership, both in print and online, and her books have sold over 3.5 million copies worldwide in more than 30 languages. The Happiness Project spent 2 years on the bestseller list. This woman knows happiness, let me just tell you. On her top-ranking award-winning podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin, she discusses happiness and good habits with her sister, Elizabeth Kraft. She's been interviewed by Oprah, eaten dinner with Daniel Kahneman, walked arm in arm with the Dalai Lama, and had her work written up in a medical journal and has been an answer on the game show Jeopardy! In her work, she draws from cutting-edge science, the wisdom of the ages, lessons from popular culture, and her own experiences to explore how we can make our lives happier, healthier, more productive, and yes, more creative. Here we go with Gretchen Rubin. So welcome to the Adult Chair podcast, Gretchen Rubin.
I'm so happy to get the chance to talk to you today.
I know, me too. We were already talking about some things that are piquing my interest. So it's going to be a good show today, I have a feeling.
Yeah, we're interested in so many of the same subjects.
I think so, for sure. So let's, I was saying, you're like the happiness guru. I read that you actually have walked arm in arm with the Dalai Lama. That's pretty impressive, I have to say.
Yes, it was an amazing experience. Yep.
Dang, girl. I wanted to ask, I like to ask this question. Tell us a little bit about your story. Like, how did you become, I'm calling you the happiness guru, but how did you become this person that you are today and really wanting to share with the world about happiness and other things we're going to talk about, but of course, happiness, that's what we're talking about today.
Well, there were several stages. So I started my career in law, and I was actually clerking for the United States Supreme Court for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor when I realized that I actually wanted to be a writer. So my first hurdle was to switch from law to writing. And so I had an idea for a book that I wanted to write. I had no idea how to do that. So I went to the bookstore and got a book called something like How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal. And I just followed the directions. Wow. So I got an agent and then I started writing. But the book that that I think a lot of people became aware of me as a writer was when I wrote a book called The Happiness Project. And like many people, I had been working very, very hard for 10 years. And then it was like, oh, look, it's an overnight sensation. No, I had been working really hard. But that was, and that's when I got into the subject of happiness. And that started just in a very ordinary moment of my life. I was stuck on a city bus in the pouring rain. And I just asked myself one of those kind of rhetorical questions, like, what do I want from life anyway? And I thought, well, I want to be happy. But I realized I didn't spend any time thinking about whether I was happy or was it possible to be happier. So I ran to the library and got a giant stack of books about happiness and started researching it. And it was just going to be for me. It was just going to be my happiness project. But it quickly became such a fascinating subject that I realized, wow, this should be my next book. And then really ever since then, as you say, I've been kind of going deeper and deeper into happiness and related subjects. So I wrote a book, Better Than Before, that's all about habit formation. Because of course, if you're talking about happiness, a lot of times you start talking about habits because we want the habit of seeing our friends more or reading more or getting more sleep or exercising or eating more healthfully. And that goes to habits. And then my study of habits got me into something called the Four Tendencies, which is a personality framework that in a way, I guess I created, but it feels like I really discovered it because in studying how people can or can't successfully change their habits, I noticed how people fell into these very distinct categories. And now I'm working on a book about the five senses and how we can tap into our five senses for a sense of like greater vitality and connection, which is also related to happiness, but it's kind of like a very a subset within happiness. So that's how I've become launched into this giant subject of happiness.
I love this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be juicy conversation. This is good.
Good.
Love it. So talk to us about some concrete steps that we can take to start boosting our happiness.
Right. If you want to sort of know, okay, what can I do starting tomorrow? Things that don't take any time, energy, or money, like what can I do? So one place to start, there's a couple different places you might think about starting. One is to think about your own body, because our physical experience is always going to color our emotional experience. And when we have more energy, everything is easier. It's easier to have a sense of humor. It's easier to plan a party. It's easier to go to a party. It's easier just to deal with the stresses and strains of everyday life. So that's things like getting enough sleep, getting some exercise, not exercising at the outer limits of your strength, but like going for a 20-minute walk, getting some sunshine in your face, which more and more research is showing how important the circadian rhythm is stress. So those are things about taking care of your body. and your energy, trying to get yourself a sense of energy. And then you might also say, well, relationships. Ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree that a key, maybe if you had to pick one thing, the key to happiness is relationships. So anything you can do to strengthen your relationships or broaden your relationships is something that's likely to boost your happiness. So whether that's like starting a book group or going for, arranging to walk with a friend, or taking a few minutes to talk to a coworker, and kind of forging those bonds. So anything that goes to relationships is a really good use of our time, energy, or money. But then you could also say, okay, but let's step back. And what you really need is self-knowledge. You have to know yourself. You have to think, well, what kind of person am I? What's important to me? What are my interests, my values, my temperament? Because sometimes I think we try to cram ourselves into somebody else's idea of what it would be to have a happy life, or what we wish was true for us, instead of really thinking about what is true for us. And just to take a very obvious kind of superficial example, but meaningful example, is morning people and night people. This is a real thing.
Yep.
30% of the population is night people. They are at their most productive and energetic and creative later in the day. And so often people are told, hey, get up early and do the hardest thing first, or, if something's important to you, do it first thing in the day. And it's that isn't bad advice if you're a morning person, but for a night person, they're just not setting themselves up for success. And it's not that it's right or wrong to do that. It's just that what works for you. And I think sometimes people are like, well, just tell me the best way, the right way, and I'll do it, instead of saying, well, let me think about when I've succeeded in the past, or what appeals to me, or when I tended to be able to follow through with things. Don't suit other people, suit yourself, and don't try to change yourself. Just change your surroundings, change your schedule, change your circumstances, so that things are suited to you. And then I think it's much easier for us to do the things that will make us happier.
But when you talk about the morning, I'm thinking about so many people that I know that are morning people or night people. Can you change that in your research? Did you ever figure out that? Are we able to change that? My husband has tried for years. He cannot. So please tell me.
Well, it's largely genetically determined, and it's also a function of age. So as people age, they will become more morning people. So a lot of times people will say to me oh, I've trained myself. And I'm like, yeah, over the course of 15 years, you've trained yourself, because now you're 15 years older. But really, this seems to be, and so about 30% of people are night people, 40% of people are morning people, and then everybody else is sort of in between. So if you're sort of in between, you can probably, push yourself one way or the other. But maybe your husband is one of these people that they are just profoundly night people, and they just have a very different kind of energy level. Now, sometimes you can't change your life. You've got, you have a morning meeting and your boss won't move it, or you've got kids that have to be up and out. And so you have to get yourself up and out. But often people who even could organize things to suit themselves don't, because they don't really think of it as being a legitimate thing to worry about. They don't even people who could take advantage of flexibility sometimes don't. And I know this is true of morning people too. I have a friend who's a morning person, and he was sort of sleeping through a lot of the morning because he just sort of could. And he sort of convinced himself oh, well, everybody would sleep late if they could. And I'm like, but you're I knew him very well. I was like, you're a real morning person. Why don't you get up and do something for fun for 2 hours? You don't have to start working, but you could be reading for fun, or, playing with your dogs, or, watching TV, whatever you feel like doing. Because you actually get up and feel good in the morning. So you want to take advantage of that.
Interesting. I like those steps. And I think though, even the little things you're talking about, when prior to the show, we were talking about habits, but exercise, going to sleep on things like this, I think are difficult for a lot of people. They have that block in their mind. When you say to go exercise to boost happiness, I personally know people that go, I don't want to exercise.
Right.
I don't want
to. So I agree. This puzzled me so much when I was studying habits, because people would say to me, well, some people would be like, well, I just don't want to do it. But what was more puzzling to me was the people who would say, I so much want to do it. I absolutely know that I would feel better. I know when I do it, I feel better. And yet I'm not doing it. And I was like, well, but then sometimes they could do it. And I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. So This is the Four Tendencies personality framework. And so can I take you through all four?
Yes,
okay.
Please.
Okay. So this is a framework that divides people into four categories: upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. And I'm going to explain this, and most people know what they are right away. They know the people in their life. We could do the characters on Game of Thrones. These are very obvious once you know what to look for. But if you're the kind of person who likes to take a quiz and get an answer and a report, you can go to GretchenRubin.com/4 tendencies, FOUR tendencies. Like 3.5 million people have taken this quiz. It's free and quick.
Wow.
And it will tell you, but like I say, I'm just going to describe this and most people know what they are because again, these are so obvious.
Yes.
So what this is looking at, it sounds boring, but it turns out to be really, really juicy, is how you respond to expectations. So all of us face two kinds of expectations: outer expectations, like a work deadline or request from a friend, and our inner expectations, my own desire to keep a New Year's resolution, my own desire to get back into meditation. So depending on whether you meet or resist outer and inner expectations, that's what makes you, in different combination, upholder, questioner, obliger, rebel. So upholders are people who readily meet outer and inner expectations. So these are the people who they meet the work deadline, they keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss. Like they want to know what other people expect from them, but their expectations for themselves are just as important and they follow through. So their motto is discipline is my freedom. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do it if they think it makes sense. So they resist anything arbitrary, ineffective, unjustified. They always have to know why. So they're making everything an inner expectation. If it meets their inner standard, if it makes sense to them, they'll do it, no problem. If it fails their standard, they will push back. So their motto is, I'll comply if you convince me why. Then there are obligers. Now, obliger is the biggest tendency for both men and women. You either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. Obliger is big time. They are the rock of the world. They make great leaders, great team members, great family members, great friends. Their issue is that they readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. So they're always thinking like, why is it that I can always keep my promises to other people, but I don't keep my promises to myself? The solution for obligers is outer accountability. To meet an inner expectation, they must have a form of outer expectation. So if you want to read more, you have to join a book group. If you want to exercise more, you work out with a friend, you work out with a trainer, you take your dog for a run, you raise money for a charity, you think of your duty to your future self. There needs to be some form of outer accountability. So the motto of the obliger is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. And then the final tendency is the rebel tendency. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do, anything they choose to do. But if you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. And typically they don't tell themselves what to do. Like they don't sign up for a 10 a.m. spin class on Saturday because they think, I don't know what I'm going to want to do on Saturday. And just the idea that somebody's expecting me to show up is going to annoy me. So their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. So these are the four. And how you get yourself to do something, or how you sort of set up somebody else to make it more likely that they follow through, is very different depending on which of the four tendencies a person falls into.
Are we able to be like a little bit of a couple of them, or no? Like a little bit of this and a little bit of that?
Well, so that's
sometimes with work, I'm one way and I'm looking at myself as a rebel in a lot of other ways. So it's like, but not with this company that I have. With the company, I meet deadlines, I'm there on time, I show up. But if someone tries to ask me like, hey, can you do this on the Saturday? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing on Saturday. Why are you asking me? And I feel like they're trying to put me in a cage, is the feeling. Like, I don't like those kinds of expectations. I'll let you know on Friday night if I can see you on Saturday morning.
Right. Well, you sound like a true rebel, but you're doing what you want to do. You're meeting those deadlines because you want to, not because somebody else is making you. And you probably work for yourself because you don't like other people telling you what you do.
I cannot work.
You can be right.
No.
Like, look, but rebels often have the value. They want to be powerful. They want to be successful. They want people to admire their work. They want to make a lot of money. They want to have a lot of influence. They want to be reliable parents. They want to be responsive partners. They want to be loyal friends. They can do anything they want to do. But if there's a sign on the wall telling them to do it, they'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So that's very deeply rebel. So here's the thing.
Yeah, it's true.
I am a big believer in the genetic roots of personality. I think we bring the four tendencies into the world with us. We're not one at 20 and one at 40. We're not one at work and one at home. It is true, though, that each of the tendencies overlaps with two tendencies. So like you're a rebel, which is the smallest tendency, by the way. So in a way, rebels are like questioners because they both resist outer expectations. And rebels also overlap with obligers because they both resist inner expectations. And so depending on whether you're a rebel who tips to questioner or rebel who tips to obliger, that can kind of color how your tendency comes out. So for instance, in my marriage, I'm an upholder who tips to questioner. My husband is a questioner who tips to upholder. So we're very different, but there's a lot, but we also kind of really get each other because we sort of partake of a little bit of that overlapping tendency, even though we're still very much within our own tendency. So it is very useful to know kind of which way you lean.
It's fascinating. I love this. This is really good. Yeah, I think I am a rebel. I don't know.
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something about a rebel. I'll give you a rebel tip. When you look at rebels, when they're paired up, when they have a team, when they have a romance, usually where there's a rebel, there's an obliger. Rebels almost always team up with obligers, and that's a very, very successful and stable partnership. Yes, it's not inevitable.
My husband is an obliger.
There you go. That is overwhelmingly the pattern that you see.
I'm thinking about, okay, so is this, I'm curious. I love to lift weights, but I hate going to the gym. And I have a trainer that I have set up specifically to make sure that I go every Tuesday, Thursday morning. And I get so mad the morning that I have to go. I get mad the night before and I get there. Rebel. I'm so pissed the whole time. We're doing planks. We're doing all this crap on the floor. I get so annoyed. And then I'm like, you must put me on the weights because I love to lift weights. And then the last 15 minutes, we'll do weights. She's trying to really work on my core and my lower back and all this. I'm miserable the whole time. And I tell her how much I hate her. I'm there and we love each other, but I'm like, I can't stand this shit. I hate it. Yeah. And then I get home and I feel really good. And I go, I'm really glad I went to the trainer today. Like, it's so confusing in my brain. I'm like, yes. And why don't I look forward to going? Because I resist. Yes. But it's on that calendar. I've already paid for it. So I set it up like that to force myself to go.
Right.
That's a rebel for sure.
Yeah. And because like for an obliger, that would be very easy peasy. Cause it's like, oh, I paid, my trainer is counting on me. Like that would make it very automatic and kind of frictionless for them. Same thing with an upholder. So I think what's happening to you, so rebels hate the feeling of being trapped, of being chained, of being controlled.
I say that, don't put me in a cage. I don't like feeling like I don't have any options.
And one thing that I've seen a lot of rebels do, not specifically with weight training, but let's just say exercising in general, they might do something like join a big gym that has a lot of different options. So like I can go when I want and I can do what I want. If I feel like cardio, I'll do cardio. If I feel like yoga, I'll do yoga. So they could kind of pick and choose. Or they might belong to a couple different gyms. So it's like, if I'm in the mood to go here, I'll go here. If I'm in a mood to go there, I'll go there. They kind of like try to have more spontaneity because they don't like that feeling of being trapped in a calendar. So I think you're feeling trapped in a couple different ways. You're feeling trapped in your calendar because rebels don't like the feeling of having things clogging up their calendar. You're feeling trapped by someone expecting you to show up. So they don't like the feeling of someone telling them what to do.
Never.
Right. And so one of the things that sometimes works for rebels is to flip it around because they're not telling you what to do. You're telling them what to do. So you can just remember, like, I want this person's working for me. This person is doing what I want. But it might be you might just think through and say, is there a way that I could set this up in a different way? Like, I don't know how busy your trainer is or like what their schedule is like, but could you say, hey, can I just like text you half an hour before and see if you're free. Like maybe there's a way to approach it in a way so you're not like lighting yourself on fire. Or the thing that also can work with rebels is to really connect with your values. Like, this is who I am. This is what I choose. My behavior reflects who I am. I'm an athlete. I'm always somebody who is in touch with my body. I feel strong and healthy and totally connected to my muscles. And the way that I do that is through weight training. And this is what gives me that. And so that it's not you're not doing what somebody's telling you to do. What you're doing is an expression of your deepest self. So I write because I'm a writer, not because I have an assignment from my boss, or, you know, or I eat this healthy food because I'm a gourmet. I'm a foodie. I love like to try new things. I love to explore. I love to experiment. I love to go to a farmer's market and see what's there and try new things. That's why I eat these fresh fruits and vegetables. Not because my doctor is, you reframe it.
You're just reframing.
Right. But to an obliger, none of that matters. None of that matters to an obliger. It matters, but it just doesn't make them act any differently. So for an obliger could like do all of this thinking in their brain, but I'm like, yeah, you're going to have some outer accountability to follow through. And so for them to spend all this mental time thinking it through, it doesn't move their needle. But for you, saying like, oh, we'll just get it on the calendar, pay in advance, like know that somebody's expecting you to show up, that actually makes it harder for you. For an obliger, that would make it easier. So you can see how knowing someone's tendency is so important, because you could actually do something that's counterproductive. And we also give each other advice that works for us. As an upholder, I used to give people terrible advice because I would give them the advice that works for me. And by the way, practically everything works for an upholder when it comes to habit formation. So it took me a long time to wake up and realize, hey, the advice that works for me doesn't work for everybody else. Like, yeah, I'm puzzled by that, but just the fact that it works for me doesn't tell me anything about whether it's likely to work for someone else. There's no best way. There's no one right way, but you do see these patterns, and people follow through so much better when they do it in the way that's right for them. Also, a lot of times with rebels, they can kind of feel bad. They can be like, well, what's my problem? Other people can just like sign up for a strength training class and they just go, and it's like, it doesn't eat up a huge amount of their mental bandwidth. Like, what's my deal? It's like, this is the thing that rebels have. Like, this is there's so much strength in the rebel tendency. This is something that they have to work around. They have to manage, but there's a lot of ways to manage it. A lot of people are rebels. They've come up with a lot of good strategies. So figure out how to use that rather than being like, I should be a different kind of person. I should think a different way. I shouldn't have the feelings that I have. You have the feelings that you have. That's okay.
Interesting. And well, just to finish my workout story with my trainer.
Yes.
Excuse me. What I did was, it would piss me off to go for a whole hour in the morning. I would feel so much anger inside.
I bet I can guess what's coming.
So what do you think I did?
You leave early.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I started saying to her, I go, I have to leave early. She's like, what? I'm like, I'm leaving now. I have to go. I have an appointment.
That is the
times, you know, I had podcasts. I had to get home. I had to shower. So then I finally said to her, I said, listen, I said, Heidi, I'm wondering if we can change from an hour to 45 minutes. And she goes, yeah, of course. I go, so I'll get a few more sessions at the end, but I can only come for 45 minutes. And honestly, it does work better for my schedule when I have podcast recordings and stuff for my coaching program that I'm doing and all this stuff. But there are many days where I could stay an hour, but in my brain, it has helped me so much to go,
yes,
only 45 minutes, Michelle, that you can do. It's not as difficult. I still get pissed. I was with her yesterday and I was so angry the whole time. I was like, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. But
you're also doing it in your own way. You're reasserting that you're in control. So leaving early is often something that rebels will do. They'll often cancel at the last minute.
Yeah.
Which people can get very hurt because they're like, oh, I don't understand. Or like, they won't commit to something like, oh, I asked you to go to this great concert. I don't understand like why you can't tell me. It's like, they just resist having that commitment. Just like that thing on their calendar. So yeah, I think that that's a great, like a rebel thing is like, oh, I'm going to do it my way. You're going to do it my way. Or like they might break a rule. Like,
I was
everybody says
rule
you have to
breaker.
wear gloves, but I don't wear gloves. Or everybody says you have to wear shoes, but I don't wear shoes.
I feel like this is so bad. Like, and I tried a sorority in college for like 1 year. I hated it. I'm like, this conforming makes me want to vomit every day. And then I had, other girls in the sorority were like, isn't this the best? And let's go do this. I'm like, I freaking hate it. I dropped out. I couldn't handle it. It pissed me off. It just made me angry. I'm like, I can't stand it. Why do you want to be like everybody else?
But you can see though, also like, this is really important. If you're like, let's say you're thinking of taking a job, because for rebels, they do better when like, it's like, hey, you've got the chops to get this done. Go do where you're working your way, come back and tell me in a month. And you're like, awesome. I got this. I'll do it.
Yes.
And maybe I'll do it all the last 3 days, but I'll get it done and I'll blow you away. But whereas an obliger, they want accountability. They do better with like, let's check in and let's have internal deadlines and milestones. And let's have this sense of accountability that helps them thrive. And you could just see like, I remember I have a friend who was a writer and she said to her editor, look, I need deadlines. Give me deadlines, convince me that they're real, or I just am not going to get anything done. And the editor, thinking that he was being kind and kind of, magnanimous, was like, oh no, I know it'll be great. Do it at your own time.
Yes.
And she was like, okay. So she didn't write anything until the very last minute. And then it wasn't that good because she hadn't spent the time on it. Whereas, but like with a rebel, that might've worked great with a rebel who's just like, yeah, I'll do it in my own way, in my own time. Don't tell me what to do or how to do it. But with an obliger, it's better to have that sense of like, oh, I'm checking in on you. And oh, I was looking forward to reading a chapter over the weekend. So can you get that to me by Friday? And like, ooh, yeah, it's going to hold up the system if I don't have that, if I don't get your draft. It's like, that's helpful for obligers. So we can work with each other to help us all achieve our aims. But sometimes we have to like provide a different way from what would work for us. As an upholder, I don't need much supervision. I'm kind of like, and I used to say like, I don't need to be your babysitter. You do your work in your way and I'll do my work in my way. But now I understand like that doesn't work for a lot of people. Like my perspective is not universal. Like, right? Yeah. Mind blown.
Fascinating.
We're not all the same.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about resistance that would come up for every single one. Every single four must have some kind of resistance.
Yes. Yes. Questioners, for instance, often have analysis paralysis. This is when their desire for perfect information makes it hard for them to move forward or to make a decision. So it's like, let's say they want to exercise and they're like, but what's the best way to exercise? What's the most efficient way to exercise? What does science show? What do my friends say works? How do I customize this for me? I need to come up with the absolute best, most efficient way for me to exercise. But a lot of times in this world, we have to act without perfect information. So questioners, like you were talking about reframing, questioners have to say things like, don't get it perfect, get it going. I'm going to experiment on myself. I'll try something and learn. If it doesn't work, I can move on, but I'll know more about myself if I start. I can look at a trusted authority. I really respect this person's judgment and their experience. If they use this workout, I can use that workout. There's ways for them to get out of analysis paralysis once they realize that that's what's happening. Because usually when there's a habit that a questioner really wants to form and they're puzzled by like, well, why am I stuck? Usually I'm like, I don't think in your heart of hearts, you've really become convinced this is the right way and that this makes the most sense. And questioners have to have that foundation and then their behavior can follow.
Wow. And all of this is in the book. Like if there's a resistance to, and okay.
Absolutely. This book, the Four Tendencies. Well, I have to say the rebel tendency it's got the fewest members, but it's the longest chapter because it's the most different from the other three.
Of course,
I think, and the most misunderstood. Yeah. And then an obliger, because that's such a big tendency. I've got to mention obliger rebellion. And you may have experienced this with your husband. So obliger rebellion is when an obliger meets an expectation, and then suddenly they snap and they say, this I will not do. Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of small and funny, like, I'm not going to answer your emails for 2 weeks, or I'm going to be deliberately late.
I'll tell you what he did.
Okay. All right.
Totally pissed me off. Out of left field. We've been married 25 years. he started leaving the toilet seats up.
There you go. There
I go,
you go.
what the hell?
Yep.
I go, what are you doing?
Great example.
Like this happened like in the last year. And I go,
Yeah.
what's up with the toilet seats? He goes,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? And I go, you're being passive aggressive. What the hell are you putting? You're leaving toilet seats up. That's gross. In the middle of the night when I pee, I fall in the toilet. Like, keep the toilet seats down. Well, you've done this. He goes, I guess I forgot. And it lasted like a week. And then I judged him and compared him. I don't remember who I compared him to. It was really cruel. I go, you know who you remind me of? I don't remember who I said. Boom, that was it. Like, I'm like, oh, that's ridiculous what you're doing. You remind me of such and such. And then he stopped.
Okay, but let me tell you.
Overnight, he stopped. Like, all of a sudden,
so maybe he felt like he'd made his point. Okay, because sometimes oblige or rebellion is small and funny like that. That's a fantastic example. But also it can be huge and dramatic. Like people will wake up and be like, I'm getting a divorce, or I'm quitting this job. I'm walking out the door to a competitor right now, today. And often obligers will say that it feels kind of out of control. Like they say, I'm acting out of character. I don't know why I'm acting this way. I'm not acting the way I usually do. And it happens when obligers feel exploited, taken advantage of, unheard, or when like pressure becomes too intense. So maybe like the pandemic made everything just feel like it was too much and there had to be some kind of little explosion, because obliger rebellion is meant to be protective. It's supposed to like protect the obliger when things become just too much to bear, kind of explodes them out of a situation. So sometimes it can be protective. Like it sounds like in your situation, it was kind of like it kind of was a release valve of pressure, but sometimes it can be very explosive and there can be a lot of damage. And also people around the obliger are very puzzled. Like, you're like, what's going on? Like, where is this coming from? You've been doing this for 25 years. Like, you don't forget to do this, right? Or people are sort of like, well, I asked you if you would want to be on a committee and you said you would. So I don't understand why you're so mad at me now. Yeah. Or like, we've been friends for years. I don't understand, like, all of a sudden now why you're so angry at me. This is obliger rebellion. And so it's really important for people around obligers and obligers themselves to be watching. Because when you know about there's so many examples like in movies and TV of oblige rebellion, because it's a very common pattern. When you know what to look for, you see the building anger, you see the building resentment. And like, yeah, it may look like something that's being passive aggressive. That's often what it's called. But what it is it's the obliger pushing back, and everybody around that obliger really needs to say like, hey, this is coming. What's too much for you? Because sometimes also obliger rebellion, like, the part that's injured isn't always the part that hurts. And so sometimes obliger rebellion can come out in one area, but really something else is the problem. And so you need to say like, where is this coming from? Why are you feeling this way? Let's figure this out. Let's get you the relief. Let's get you let's pay attention to what you're feeling, because it can be explosive and have very serious consequences.
He's done that too. It doesn't happen very often, but he does. Yeah. But that sounds like a people pleaser. Is the same kind of thing?
No, well, see, this is interesting. Sometimes people say that obligers are people pleasers, but it's like, the thing that's funny about the Four Tendencies is it's just this one very narrow aspect of your personality. So it's very possible to be an obliger and not care at all about other people. Like, there's nothing about I think obligers look at the pattern of their behavior and they say, I'm meeting other people's expectations, but I'm not meeting my expectations for myself. Therefore, what I'm trying to do is please other people. But that might be associated with it, but it's not necessary. Some obligers just don't have a high value of consideration for other people. And they're like, I'll do it if I have to. I'll do it if somebody makes me do it, but I'm not going to do it but I'm not going to do it just because it's important to me. And so the people pleasing is incidental. And I think sometimes obligers, because they think they're people pleasers, they kind of have this mischaracterization of what's going on. And so they make a mistake, which can be very serious in terms of like planning their own futures, what they think would happen is, if other people's expectations would fade, my expectations could be met. So I've heard from obligers who are like, I went on early retirement because I had all these plans for things that I wanted to do, but I haven't done any of them. Or I'm going to quit this demanding job and then I'll have time for myself. Or I'll get divorced from this demanding person and then finally I'll meet all my expectations for myself. but that doesn't work because obligers need outer accountability. So just the idea that that outer accountability goes away doesn't mean that inner accountability will be met. You always have to have a form of outer accountability. So quitting that challenging job won't help you write a novel in your free time. For that, you need outer accountability if you're an obliger.
I love this. I'm thinking about like the girls that work for me. I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about my friends. Like once you know who they are, then you can, I guess, talk to them in a brand new way. Your communication style would change once you know this.
100%. 100%.
This is valuable in business. I'm thinking I am the rebel in my company, and these, like all the people that work for me, like they're not.
Right. Of course. Right. Because rebels don't hire other rebels typically.
No, we would not do that. So they need to know, and they know me. But this, I think about the Enneagram too. Does this correlate at all with the Enneagram, or did you study that at all?
Well, I love all personality frameworks, and I think they all have kind of their own power and their own sort of angle. And I think you really lose their magic if you try to map them on top of each other. So I don't try to say the Enneagram or DISC or anything, because it's sort of like, let them be, because they all let them use their own vocabulary. But I mean, back to the thing about who you work with. One of the sections in the Four Tendencies book is about working for a rebel, because there's particular
book for everyone that works for me,
because there are real particular challenges for working with a rebel. And sometimes when you understand, like, there's nothing personal here. This is the way they are all the time. There's many strengths to it, and there's some downsides too. It kind of takes the sting out of it. Whereas if you're like, why is this person behaving like this? Like, why can't they ever like pay attention to what I need? And it's like, it has nothing to do with you. This is just a way of,
I like that you said it was didn't you say, wait, or is that about happiness, our genetic makeup, like these four tendencies, like this is just how I was born, or this is how I was raised?
Yeah, no, it's how you were born. I really don't think that it's no, your upbringing will shape it, because I think, like, if you're a questioner and you're raised in North Korea, you're going to learn to shut that down. Right. Exactly. Whereas if you were raised in Silicon Valley, you might be like, oh, this is my greatest asset. So certainly our culture. And then sometimes you see like culture kind of affects how we interpret our tendency too. Like, I think some people who are obligers are like, I'm so hardcore. I give 110% to my client. You think I got time to exercise? No way. Because I'm a person who's always there for my client. Right. Like, and you're like, ooh, I'm a badass. But then other people are like, oh, I don't know what my problem is. I mean, I can do whatever other people want me to do. But like, when it comes to taking care of myself, like, I never make time to, and so they kind of they see that they're criticizing themselves for something. Somebody else is kind of heroicizing it. It's the same pattern of behavior, which is, I can meet my expectations for other people, but I'm not meeting my expectations for myself. But people kind of spin it a different way sometimes, depending on how they're looking at it. But to me, I'm like, it's the same core behavior, and it would have the same core way of addressing it if you wanted to address it.
Wow. This is such good stuff. Oh my God. I gotta read this book.
I love that you're just like such a full-hearted rebel. It's like,
I love it. I feel badly for people that work for me though, but yes.
People love working for rebels, because rebels are
they're so much fun to work with. That's for sure. I have a blast, but man, when they put but here's the thing. I like the deadlines. Like my EA, I'll say, put things on my calendar. Tell me when it's due, so I know. And I love to meet a deadline. I like to get that A+ from them. Like, thank you for doing this, Michelle, on time. I'm like, that feels good to me, but I need a few days to do it. Don't tell me I need it done in an hour. That pisses me off, but give me a few days and I'll get it done.
Well, I think this is the larger point, even beyond the four tendencies and back to this idea of happiness. It's like, so much of it is self-knowledge, because when you know yourself and what you need to set yourself up for success and to meet your aims, then it's like, okay, let's just do that. Like, you have an EA, let's just talk about how you work best, and let's set that up so everybody can count on it, and everybody can organize around it, and everybody can like have an efficient, harmonious thing. And now maybe somebody who works for you works in a different way. It's like, okay, well, maybe we'll set things up a little bit different for you, as long as it's no skin off my back. Let's accommodate. Let's do what we can to help everybody thrive. And hey, maybe we need to figure out how to marry two styles that are really kind of inconsistent. Okay, that's a different problem. Saying like, how do we work it out to suit us both the best we can? That's different from saying like, Michelle, you're wrong, I'm right. Or
Yeah.
I'm wrong, you're right. It's like, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. Let's figure out a situation that can work the best for all of us. Let's talk it through, and not like there's no, it's just, let's just figure out how we can make this work as best we can, which is a very different aim than saying, we're going to come up with a plan, a 10-point plan, and everybody's going to follow it and everybody's going to love it. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. It's like, that's not how it works. It's like the time for the staff meeting. Maybe you're a morning person. You're like, let's have the staff meeting at 7:45. Let's just get it out of the way. And then you're like, half my team is night people. They're like, they can barely like drag themselves out of bed. It's like, okay, maybe you would like it at 7:15 and they would like it at 11:15. What if it's at 9:45? Maybe that's a little bit better for everyone, or maybe not, or maybe you have it in the afternoon. Like, there's a million solutions once you understand that that's the challenge.
Oh my God. Okay. This is so good. I love it.
Okay.
So let's talk about misconceptions about happiness and good habits. What are the misconceptions around happiness?
Well, one of the misconceptions is that there's one right way, just as we've been talking about. We're clearly just talking to you as a rebel. You see that that's not one right way. And I think another misconception of happiness, and this is a really profound, and it's not so much a misconception, but it's a concern. And I think sometimes people are concerned because they think, look, I have all the elements of a happy life. If I want to be happier, I must be a spoiled brat. Or they think, look, in a world full of suffering and injustice, it's not morally appropriate for me to spend a lot of time and energy seeking to be happier. But in fact, what the research shows, and I think if you think about the people in your life, you see this really borne out, that actually happier people are more interested in the problems of the world, and they're more interested in the problems of the people around them. And research shows that happier people, they donate more money, they volunteer more time, they're more likely to vote, they have healthier habits, they make better leaders and better team members. They're more likely to help out if a family member or a friend or a colleague or a neighbor needs a hand. Because when we're happier, we have the emotional wherewithal to turn outward and to think about other people and the pain of the world. And when we're less happy, we can tend to become isolated and defensive and preoccupied with our own problems because we're not very happy. And so I think, it's like that old cliche, put on your own oxygen mask first. And that's a cliche because we get it. We understand that if you are going to be of service to others, you have to serve yourself. You have to, fill up your own gas tank. You have to think about yourself. But these things, it's not an either or. It's not like I can think about myself or think about other people. It's like I'm going to think about myself and I will think about other people. And so
I preach this. I preach this so much. You have to take care of yourself. You have to put yourself first. And you know what I hear back from some people, not all. What do you think I hear? It's selfish.
Right.
It's selfish. I can't do that.
Look,
I have to put others first. It says here that so please help me.
Right. Well, partly it's like, if it is selfish to be happier, you should be selfish, if only for selfless reasons, because this is really what arms you to do. But also, I think what you're hearing is obligers, and obligers not understanding the pattern. And they're saying, well, I'm not doing the things that I know I should do to take care of myself. Why? Because that doesn't seem to make sense. It must be that I am not selfish enough to do the things to take care of myself. So I would say, don't even think about selfish, unselfish. Don't even think about that. Just get yourself out of accountability. You want to exercise more? Sign up with that trainer, work out with a friend who's going to be really annoyed if you don't show up, pay money up front, if that matters. Sometimes obligers almost feel like they're off the hook if they pay, and then they feel like they don't have to follow through. So it's not always a good obliger technique. But so just say, like, just forget about selfish, just give yourself outer accountability and then see how you do. Because often that is anytime people talk about self-care, priorities, selfishness, motivation, taking time for yourself, these are big warning signs of obliger. And the solution is outer accountability.
That's really good. What about good habits? Misconceptions about good habits. Can we just spend a little bit more time on habits? I really want to work on how do we change our habits? And again, now that we have these four tendencies, how can we collectively, all four of us, all four tendencies, how do we cultivate really good habits for self?
Well, you really do have to take into account your tendency, because say, like, just about any system works for an upholder. Questioners have to have that sense of rationale and efficiency. Obligers have to have outer accountability. Rebels have to feel very tied into their own choice, their own identity, their own freedom. So then but then there are some things that work pretty much for everybody. Like we're like hilariously susceptible to things being convenient and inconvenient. So anything you want yourself to do, make it as convenient as possible. And if you don't want to do it, make it inconvenient. So like, if you don't want to watch TV when you get home from work, put the remote control, like on a high shelf in a closet on the other part of the house, because you're going to have to go get that remote control if you're going to turn on the TV. Or let's say in your phone, you can turn your phone to grayscale so that it's in black, white, and gray instead of being in color. And it's a lot less fun to use your phone when it's in grayscale.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
It's super easy. You just look up grayscale and how to do it. It's like you can do it in 3 clicks. I can show on the here.
Because
I can't show how to do it, but I can show you. Like here it is, and there, and now.
What are you hitting?
There's that. See how?
How'd you do it though?
I have it set up. Once you've done it once, you can do it with 3 clicks. But I think you have.
It's not an app. It's just part of the phone.
No, it's part of your phone. You go into color filters and go to grayscale. Cool. Yeah. It's probably in settings or display.
I personally don't like my phone, so I don't have an issue with that. But I know a heck of a lot of people. I know personally people that need to do that.
It also works great if your kid is using your phone or your iPad, because you can just be like, oh, it's broken. I don't know how to fix it. And then it's much less. Partly it's less enchanting, but it's also harder. It's visually more, color is, we see color because it helps us navigate the visual world so much more efficiently. And that's one of the reasons we see color. And so it's just
appealing.
It's not appealing.
Yeah.
So that's like a way of using inconvenience. And then convenience, I've heard of people who sleep in their gym clothes. So they just in the morning, they're like already dressed for the gym. I'm like, whatever works for you. That is a great idea. Or the whole thing about like, if you want to eat certain kinds of like healthy foods, you keep those like in your sight line, right within easy reach, and anything that's sort of like in a crinkly package, you have very inaccessible to you.
What I have to say, I agree with you here because, sorry, I'm pointing my pen at you.
Yes,
Gretchen. Yes. I was thinking, I was like, yeah. So my husband went out and bought, or we together bought these, let me start over. He bought the ugly plastic little jars for the countertop, like with a little white plastic. And I'm like, those are so ugly. But he put in them raw almonds, pumpkin seeds, and sunflower seeds, because he knows that I eat the pumpkin and the sunflower seeds. And I'm like, those are so ugly. So I went out and I went to Target, bought these beautiful, they're really tall, like mason jar looking things with a little clamp on. They're beautiful. And I put the nuts in, but either way, I can't stop eating them now. And that's what's healthy. I don't even walk over to the pantry, which we don't have a lot of junk in our pantry, but there's some, but it's on the counter. It's in front of me all the time, every day. And I reach over and I'll grab a handful of pumpkin seeds. That stuff works. But what do you say to people? Because I hear this too, when people will say, I'm trying to be healthy, but my husband keeps buying the Oreos and all the sugary crap, and that's in the pantry, and I go reach for that. When someone else in the house is buying the junk.
Okay. So here's a distinction for people to consider. And this is so in my book, Better Than Before, I talk about the 21 strategies we can use to make or break our habits. And some of the strategies work really well for some people and not for others. So one of the strategies to consider that might work for you is the strategy of abstaining. So I'm an abstainer. And for abstainers, when they are facing a strong temptation, not a weak temptation, a strong temptation, if you are an abstainer, it's easier for you to have none. It's easier to have 0, because once we start, we tend to go all the way. So I can have no Thin Mint cookies, or I can have 10 Thin Mint cookies, but I can't have 1 Thin Mint cookie. I can't have half a dish of ice cream. I can't have part of a brownie, but I can have none. And it's much easier for me. So often people just assume that moderation is pleasant to the wise, follow the 80-20 rule. You should be able to have a little bit. And like, that is true for moderators. Moderators get kind of panicky and rebellious if they're told they can never have something. They do better when they have a little bit, or they have it sometimes. So these are the people who are like, I have a bar of fine chocolate in my desk drawer, and every day or two, I have one square of fine chocolate, and that's all you need to satisfy your sweet tooth. And I'm like, no way, no how. For me, if I have one square of fine chocolate, I'm eating the whole thing. It's 8 a.m. I don't care. Or I spend the whole day thinking about it, which is so boring.
And what are you again on the Four
I'm an
Tendencies?
abstainer.
You're the abstainer. Okay.
Okay. So I ended up, because I have a tremendous sweet tooth, I now abstain from sugar. And like I abstain basically from all carbs. You cannot believe what I abstain from. I'm
all carbs,
except for like nuts and leafy green vegetables. I do not eat lots of carbs, and
like
and
no
I eat
potatoes,
cheese.
no sugar, no nothing,
no sugar, no potatoes, no rice, no flour, no starchy vegetables. So no corn, no peas.
I thought, you know what? I just said to my husband the other day, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. What you just said.
Read Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes. I read it, and overnight I changed everything about the way that I eat. I love it. But that works really well for me. It wouldn't necessarily work for other people. I love it. For me, it's easier. It's more energizing. I feel so free. I love it. But for some people, they don't want to do that. They want to have a little bit, or they have like one little square of fine chocolate. But what I would say is, first of all, if one thing isn't working for you, try the other way. So I think sometimes people assume that they don't want, that they're not abstainers, but then they, like my sister assumed she wasn't an abstainer, and then she tried it and she's like, oh, actually I am an abstainer about French fries, because that's her kryptonite.
Oh yeah.
But also I think this is a way to talk to a spouse or somebody else who's in your household, because you could just say like, first of all, you could try just abstaining and saying like, my husband's going to bring all this stuff in. I'm going to give him a shelf. He puts it on his shelf. I never look at it. I never eat it. I don't think about it. And once you kind of release it and stop thinking about it, and for a day or two goes by and you don't eat it, it kind of fades out of your memory. So sometimes people think that they're going to have more and more and more cravings, but actually when you're not indulging in something, in a temptation, it goes away. So I would say try that. Another thing
leaves your system, like your body really does truly. I was a raw vegan for almost 2 years. Yeah. And I love food. I love cooked food. I love all of it. And I stopped craving food. I mean, unless it was raw. Yeah. So I agree.
Yes. It really changes. It really does. And you could also say to somebody like, look, because a lot of times moderators are like, well, just have a little bit. Like, I don't understand like why you have this, like, why do you just like always eat the entire thing of ice cream? Of course, that's a bad idea. Just moderate yourself, control yourself, indulge a little bit. You could just say like, look, I get that for you that works, but for me, that doesn't work. And I'm finding it really hard to manage that. So maybe the thing to do is like, well, if you want ice cream, let's go out for ice cream, because it's like, you're going to go out for ice cream a lot less than you're going to eat the ice cream that's in your freezer, you know? And like, let's, or again, talk about managing it, because a lot of times these arguments are like, well, I'm right, you're wrong, you should do it my way. Instead of saying, I get why your way works for you, but it doesn't work for me. And so let's talk about how we work this out. I mean, maybe, you know, once you sort of acknowledge that like they can't just wave their hand and say, well, you're wrong. You feel the way you feel, but you can't say to them, they're wrong. If you've got somebody, and this comes up a lot with food, it's like somebody's like, they might really feel very emotional about the fact that they really want to have certain treats around. And they don't want you to just say, well, you can't have these treats around. And you might feel very emotional about the fact that they're bringing these treats into the house when they know that it's not good for you or it's not making you happy. And so that it feels like very, very upsetting, and like no one's showing any consideration for anybody else. And I think the thing is to just like try to take it down and say, okay, this is the situation. This is what you want. This is what I want. This is what's at stake for both of us. You can't just say, well, you should just feel differently.
Right.
That's not a solution. It's just like, well, given the way, given you and given me, and given that's where we are right now, what do we do? Yeah.
I like that. Gretchen, this was so awesome. Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it so much. I love getting a chance to talk to a rebel.
I love
the few, but the proud. Yes, the strong. Yeah.
Tell us, what do you have going on? Where can people find you?
I am wildly accessible through GretchenRubin.com, and I'm Gretchen Rubin is my handle on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I have a podcast where every week I talk about happiness and good habits with my sister, who's a showrunner in Hollywood. She's an obliger. and called Happier with Gretchen Rubin. And then I also have an app called the Happier app, which uses the Four Tendencies to help guide you towards what kind of tools for habit tracking are most likely to work with you, on the idea that like when you use the one that works for you, it's going to stick better and do a better job for you. Though, of course, you can always pick any tool you want. We're not telling you you have to do it, just a suggestion. Yeah. And I have a website, GretchenRubin.com, where you can read about all my books and get links, and I have all kinds of free resources. And the quiz, again, is GretchenRubin.com/4 tendencies, FOUR tendencies. And you can take that quiz and get a little report to get you started on understanding how to tap into your tendency.
Thank you so much. I will have all of this in the show notes. This was
excellent.
Phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
I'm getting all the things. I'm going to learn more about the Rebel.
I know. Well, let me know how it goes. Thanks so much. It was so fun. I feel like we could talk all day. Thank you.
I know. Me too. Thank you.